hard copy of the 109.
People have no clue that in 2024, the best way to make money on Amazon is not by
19 pages of the second copy of the Winter Park Advent Health
On
records.
10/18, October 18th. That would have been the preceding Friday.
I was given the hard copy after court at about 5:30, 5:45. I emailed the PDF of those records back to the defense as they requested. I put Bates numbers on them. I understand from court what pages they indicated that they want to use and what pages the court indicated should be included at the state's request, which is pages 26 and 48 out of the 111. I would just appreciate if I could get a copy of the intended exhibit as it shall be introduced in the court, so I can confirm those things ahead of time and not in court. And then the third thing is, I believe we had a discussion about the plethora of pages regarding the victims' hospital records, and that there was some sort of discussion we had that they were to narrow it down. And I have not been given any narrowed down version of that so that we can confirm we're on the same page or use the court's time if there's a conflict. Thank you.
Okay. Responses to the first discovery issue regarding body-worn camera and 911 calls is to the, my understanding, 5 prior incidents. Defense.
Judge, I can speak to 3 of them. There were 3 of them that I reviewed, and I believe I reviewed them on Sunday. I had made the decision for what I thought needed to be redacted. I think the first 2, if I remember correctly, I said that was fine. We didn't have any redactions to it. I think it's 1 that I said redactions to, and I think the state agrees with that. The specific one that I didn't quite know, and I think that has to do with a body cam where it comes to, and I believe it's Mr. Torres's mother. I can't quite be for sure, but she's been asking questions and all, and I think it's about, if I can recall correctly, about Mr. Torres's whereabouts at that time. I didn't know the relevance of that at that time, but that was the only part of that to let the state know. I just don't really know the relevance. It could come in at a different point and become relevant. But as to the other 2, I think we were on page with. I had been out to the jail that day. It was late. Then I asked Mr. Beck to do the other 2 redactions, but I hadn't had the opportunity to talk to him about that since. So that's where we are.
So is the 3rd incident that the state has identified for which there's no seemingly no responses to redaction, is that the body-worn camera purportedly between law enforcement and Mr. Torres's mother?
That's what I believe it to be.
Mr. J?
Bless you. We're just not on the same page. On that 3rd incident, which I believe was June 15th of 2019, the state only indicated to them that we were intending to introduce 1 video file. It is not of the victim's mother. It is of them at Sarah Boone's house. And the objection to the files that they were objecting to, which we don't seek to introduce, just said ID, and I don't know that as a legally recognized objection. So I'm confused. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to make sure we're all on the same page. We understand which file the state wants to use regarding the 3rd incident, because he's describing files the state does not intend to use. The first couple of incidents, we agree. There's a 911 call that seemingly cuts off into an OPD call at 3 minutes and 51 seconds. We're cutting that to the end. The second one, Ms. Boone at like 3 minutes and 43 seconds indicates that she had been arrested prior. So we cut that out there. We're going to cut that out of that cat's out of the bag. So what we're looking for now is just making sure we're all on the same page about the 3rd incident. I sent screenshots. There's a tool called Snipping Tool in Windows. I literally create a rectangle around the files that I'm intending to use, their file size, and the folder that includes the OCSO agency case number incident, so we can be as crystal clear as possible. And I'm still getting objections about things we don't want to introduce on that incident. And I've gotten no response with the fourth and fifth incidents.
All right, addressing the third incident is the specific portions of the June 15, 2019 incident, seemingly the body worn camera that you're making reference to, Mr. Henderson, the state has no intention of utilizing.
Yes, sir. And just it's a lot, so if I could have one more.
Sure.
To isolate which incident it is. That's not the one. My understanding is the state is talking about the third incident. That would be June 18th.
Here's the problem. I sent these pictures over with the OCSO case number, and then I get a response based on incident dates. So we have to kind of cross-reference. So we can just make the record entirely clear. OCSO incident 18-067501. There was no 911 calls and apparently no objection. So they have no redactions requested for that 2018 case. Then the next response was 6/15/2019 case. And that, for the record, is OCSO 19-054917. Their request on that one was the 911 call that we just discussed, indicating that at 3:51, well, I had to find it, 3:51, it turns into another case, and to redact that to the end. We agreed. Video 3 in that file, again, no file name, indicates at 9:40 to 9:43, there's a redact request with paren previous arrest. The state agrees to that. We heard her quickly say that at 9:43, and we will get that taken care of. Then their next response was 6/18/2019 case, which I had to cross-reference back to show that it is OCSO 19-055572. And in that particular case, what I sent them was a screenshot that includes the OCSO case number 19-055572, and it indicates there is an intent by the state to introduce 2 911 calls and 1 video file labeled axon_flex_2_video_2019-06-18_1330. My response that I received from them was video 3 in file, 2 minutes 7 seconds to 2 minutes 18 seconds paren ID, and then video 4 in file, 2 minutes and 4 seconds to 2 minutes and 16 seconds paren ID. So my confusion lies in I did not indicate 3 or 4 files. It was just 1 file. And then again, with the other 2.
I don't want to address 4 and 5 yet.
Okay.
It's my understanding there's no response. We'll address that momentarily. Responses to the clarification as to what it is the state seeks for incident 3.
No redaction.
Okay, all right. With regard to incidents 4 and 5, Mr. J, could you place on the record what it is specifically as to those incidents the state may be seeking to introduce?
Yes, sir. So what we're calling incident number 4 should be OCSO 19-078009, August 28th, 2019. We indicated the desire to use axon_flex_2019-08-28-28_2024. And then at their request, they had desired to get photos of Ms. Boone's injuries from that case. There is a 19-page PDF file, which has pictures taken by law enforcement of her injuries. I don't see anything else in there. One picture of Mr. Torres, a couple pictures of Mr. Torres, but nothing that the state was objecting to. So that was at their request that they wanted photographs in. So that is incident 4, which is labeled OCSO 19-078009.
With regard to seemingly the body-worn camera that the state seeks to enter into evidence from August 28, 2019, what say the defense?
The best things in life never change. They just get better, like Hardee's Original Bag. Back and better than ever. Just $5.99. Mix and match any 2 full-size favorites. A juicy charbroiled double cheeseburger, melty hot ham and cheese sandwich, or crispy hand-breaded chicken tender wrap. Any 2 plus fries and a drink, all just $5.99. Hardee's Original Bag. Loaded with handcrafted goodness. It's the greatest meal deal for your buck.
John, I don't know about the state's position on this. There's a portion of this video at the very end that's very personal to a investigating officer that they may want to redact. We're not asking anything for that.
Is the state seeking any redactions?
I'm just clarifying what their redaction requests are in that particular file.
Okay.
If they don't have any, then
So are there any redaction requests with regard to that particular file? Okay. I'm just keeping notes. Give me a moment, y'all. As to the 5th incident, Mr. J.
No redaction request, Your Honor. I do want to point out that we were apparently advised yesterday that the state was only going to use the 3rd video possibly. And so we haven't really spent a whole lot of time worrying about it since then.
Let me clarify as to what the 5th incident is, just so that we're all on the same playing field.
Judge, the 5th incident is OCSO 19-079759, and that was on September 4th of 2019. Within that screenshot that I sent to them, both Friday and then resent it this morning, was photographs of the defendant taken at that time. At their request, shows a cut in her ear. It's 3 photographs. Then there is also one body-worn camera labeled 1924755. Oh, strike that. 192473549_GEN_INV, and then the 911 call from that incident.
Any redactions sought by the defense with regard to that specific body-worn camera or 911 call?
Well, we're not necessarily seeking redaction, Your Honor. However, there are 2 separate videos. One seems to focus on Jorge Torres. One seems to focus on Ms. Boone. And there is clearly some redundancy. They're both body cams. One went upstairs where Mr. Torres was found hiding in a shower for bath. And so some of that's redundant. But there are actually 2 separate videos pursuant to the 5th.
Mr. J, are there 1 or 2 videos that the state's seeking?
There's one, the one that I listed, not important.
Okay. Do you know if that's Bruce, can you find out what counsel's here for? Is that the video from the perspective of, as identified by Mr. Beck, one more geared towards Ms. Boone or one more geared towards Mr. Torres?
My interpretation of both of them is there's interactions with Ms. Boone, and then there's interactions with Mr. Torres upstairs after he's located.
Mr. Beck, the specific file number was identified. So just to confirm, no redactions. Okay, all right. So just as a recap, with regard to the first incident, the 911 call, the parties have agreed to redactions at the timestamp of 351 towards the end. With regard to the second incident, body worn camera, a redaction from timestamp 940 to 943 has been agreed to. With regard to the June 15, 2019 incident, there are 2 911 calls and 1 body worn camera sought by the state, to which the defense has no redactions. The August 28th, 2019 incident, for which there is no redactions to the body worn camera, but there is a 19-page PDF with photos that the defense intends to be included with that submittal, to which the state has no objection. As to the 5th event, 3 photos of the defendant, body worn camera, and a 911 call for which there are no redactions. Does that clarify everything for the state?
Thank you.
Is there anything that I stated incorrectly, Mr. Beck, Mr. Henderson, or Mr. Owens?
No, you're wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to the next issue with regard to the 119 pages from Winter Park. Defense, are you in a position to provide, I believe we discussed it either Friday or I think it was last week, we discussed it as to how it was culled down. Yes, because we had the Richardson hearing on Friday, how that list was culled down and the additional pages that the state was seeking. And then if they were able to find, I believe it was page 68, we would readdress that. Have you provided that finalized exhibit to the defense as to those specific Winter Park health records from the 119 pages that the defense may be seeking to enter into evidence?
I believe they've received everything from us, and we identified those documents that were not specifically addressed by the defense, that the state wanted extension out of the rule of completeness. I believe we're.
But my understanding from Mr. J was that they were looking for the tangible copy of what it is that you were actually looking to move in, those 12, 14, 15 pages. Okay, if you could provide that to them by noon, I would appreciate
I'm
it.
not sure if it's, that's what we're saying.
But if it's going to be moved into evidence, we have is it going to be moved in paper form, or is it going to be moved in digital by virtue of a CD?
We can get it, Judge. We'll work on it.
Okay, perfect. Just get it to the state. It doesn't have to be intangible. Just get them what it is that if it's an electronic format, that's fine. Just the state should be entitled to know what it is that y'all are intending to move out of those pages, just to confirm it. Lastly, with regard to hospital records of the victim, I know there were conversations and discussions about that list being narrowed down. The state has advised that details as to those narrowed down records has not yet been provided. What say the defense?
The hospital records for the victim, George Torres.
It's my understanding.
We need to do that, Judge. We've got to do that.
Okay. My understanding is that the experts are potentially teed up to testify tomorrow. I don't recall if those records are a basis of the experts' opinions.
The second expert is not likely to testify until Thursday. She's testifying in May County tomorrow. I will be here Thursday. I spoke with Dr. Brandon last night. He will be present tomorrow morning as soon as he gets here from Coral Gables.
Did either doctors Brandon or Harper rely on those medical records?
No, Dr. Harper did. It's in her deposition that was taken a couple of weeks ago. I think the question was posed.
Ms. Perez, good morning. If you're here for pretrial, 19 Alpha, Judge Myers is covering.
I went up there.
Okay, thank you. You may continue.
Dr. Julie Harper, I know she considered the records of George Torres, and we took Dr. Harper's deposition, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. She was asked by the state about everything that she relied upon, and she did indicate that. Are we going to use or attempt to introduce those records? We'll pare it down if we are.
Okay, you've got till 5 p.m. today to advise the state as to what of those culled down records you're going to be utilizing. So they have the opportunity to review those in advance of Dr. Harper testifying.
And I apologize to Madam Court Reporter for speaking on top of each other. Dr. Brandon is testifying as a subject matter expert. He does not have specific familiarity with this case. And so there are
State, any other issues we need to address with regard to the discovery issues that you brought to the court's attention this morning?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, moving now to the motion. I have reviewed that motion. Um,
Judge, we were not aware of the motion until he made mention of it, so I need some time for the lawyers to review it, for us to discuss it, and to see whether or not it has merit or not.
Okay. It was e-filed last night, looks like 9:37, and then sent courtesy copy to myself through Ms. Barrios and you, Ms. Rowans, at 9:38 last night. I'll give the opportunity to review that. We can address it after the lunch hour. And that'll give the court the opportunity to do any research during the lunch hour on it as well. All right, anything else, Mr. J?
I looked at it briefly. I'm not for sure exactly what the allegation is. I don't know if we need to talk about that. So excuse me?
I'm not,
Can we approach the bench?
sure, come on up, yo. All right, thank you all very much. With regard to that motion, we're going to table that for now and address it potentially this afternoon. State is advised they're ready to proceed. Mr. Jay shook his head yes. Defense, you ready to proceed? Mr. Owens, you ready to proceed, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Boone, are you still satisfied with your lawyer's representation of you in this matter?
Absolutely.
Are you still on board with the strategy that they have employed in the use of your defense?
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and stand and bring in our panel.
Jury entering.
State, do you recognize our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you recognize our jury?
Yes.
All right, everyone would be seated. Thank you. Members of our jury, good morning. Welcome back to 12 Alpha of the Orange County Courthouse. Thank you again for your time, your attention, and your sacrifice in this matter. Just by a show of hands, if you could confer that you complied with the court's instructions last night. The record will reflect all juror members have raised their hands. All right, State, if you could please recall Detective Kepsel.
State would call Detective Kepsel.
You swear or affirm the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Ma'am, good morning again. Could you state and spell your name for the record?
Yes. My name is Chelsea Kepsel, Chelsey, Koepsel.
Mr. Cacciatore, you may proceed.
Your Honor, we had tendered the witness to the defense.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Henderson, you may proceed with any cross-examination.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Now, it's my understanding that on February 24th of 2020, you responded to this crime scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you the first officer to respond to the crime scene?
No.
So there were other officers who were there prior to you arriving. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you the first detective to respond to the crime scene?
Myself and my partner, we all arrived at the same time because we left from the same location at the same time.
Okay, and who is your partner now?
Detective Scott Lowen.
And throughout the whole time, you and Detective Lowen worked on this case together. Is that correct?
Yes, he assisted me with this case.
Now, when you arrived on the 24th, approximately how many other officers were there?
Including like deputy sheriffs, like in uniform?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Approximately 4, maybe, I would assume.
Had it been designated a crime scene at that time, and had tape or security measures been taken to protect the scene?
Yes, they have.
So that had already been done by the time that you arrived. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, in the investigation, one of your, or what you're trying to accomplish in the investigation is basically get a basics of what took place. Would you agree with me there?
Yes, I would.
And you can do that one or two ways, or a combination of ways. One is to take testimony of potential witnesses. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. This day, did you in fact do that?
Yes, I did.
And one of those potential witnesses was Sarah Boone. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
And you took a statement from Sarah Boone because we've all seen it. Is that correct?
Yes, we have.
And at that point in time, Ms. Boone did not have to talk to you if she didn't want to, did she?
No, she did not.
So she agreed to talk to you at that point in time?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Were there any other witnesses besides Ms. Boone that you talked to on this initial date of the 24th?
Just Brian Boone.
And Mr. Boone told you what? You had a chance to talk to him. He told you his involvement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, wasn't Mr. Boone's testimony, was that recorded too?
I conducted an audio recording, yes.
Okay. Is that standard procedure when you do your interviews to try to record the interviews?
Yes.
What's the benefit of that?
So I know what was said.
Okay. So, and if something goes on for a long time, you can refer back to it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and out there, that's part of talking to witnesses or potential witnesses. Okay. Also, it's your job too to identify potential physical evidence in a case.
Yes, it is.
All right. And in fact, on the 24th, did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you have anyone assisting you in doing that aspect of it?
Yes, crime scene investigators and digital forensics investigator.
All right. And was Miss Melissa Rothengarten, that's how it's pronounced? Pronounce it for me.
Rough Garden.
Rothgarten. Okay, thank you. Did she help you in that area?
She was the lead crime scene investigator, yes.
Okay. So were y'all walking around together? Give the jury an idea of how that process takes place, please.
So yes, when I initially arrived on scene, I introduced myself to Sarah Boone and explained that I wished to go inside her residence, which she gave me consent to go in and look around. I went in, looked around, and then when my CSIs arrived, they would go in, take pictures, and then I kind of leave them to do what they need to do as far as taking pictures and documenting things and measurements. And then that's when I conducted my interviews. And then I would meet back up with my crime scene investigator after interviews were conducted to kind of follow up with like things that I was told that would help us like identify things from the scene. And so, I mean, there's like multiple occasions where I would have met with my crime scene investigator inside the residence.
So this is an ongoing process during that day. You get information, you consult with them, they have information, they consult with you, and you're making a determination of what potential physical evidence that y'all at least like to document by camera, correct? Pictures, or actually collect and take away. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's accurate.
In that case, the suitcase was some evidence that y'all agreed on that we need to take this suitcase from the scene. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. How about the baseball bat? Was that done that day?
The baseball bat was collected, yes.
All right. In your viewing of the suitcase, did you view the suitcase while it was unseen?
Yes, I did.
All right. Did you notice that if there was any items, other independent loose items in the suitcase?
There were, yes.
Were those items collected?
Some of them were, yes.
Who made the determination what items of that suitcase would be taken or collected and what would not be collected?
I would say that I have the final say on what is to be collected or not collected, but we do discuss it together to make that determination for me to give the final yes or no.
Do you recall which items you decided to collect from the suitcase?
Do you have the property form that I can refer to?
No, I'll try to find it.
I know some of them, but
Ma'am, I don't have it, but to the best of your memory, can you tell? And I would understand there would be some stuff that if you had the property report to refresh your memory, you can give me more detail.
yes, to my understanding and to my recollection, we collected things that had blood left over on it. I want to say there was like a necktie potentially. I do recall there being a small amount of clothing and miscellaneous paperwork, but I do not think that we collected the paperwork. There was also a cell phone in there. It was not, it was dead, the cell phone. And then, like I said, there might be one, I think we collected 5 to 6 items from the suitcase itself, but obviously the property form would tell you specifically, but that is what I recall.
Correct, and I understand, and that's fair. Okay, so potentially you collect these items because you believe they're evidence for the case potentially, is that correct?
Yes,
And some of these items you actually collect with the potential that you might need to have them examined in greater detail, is that correct?
yes,
An example of something like that would be in this case, if you found blood on something, you might want to potentially examine that. Is that correct?
yes,
And also the stuff that you're learning outside of these items also helps you in making that determination. Isn't that correct?
I'm sorry, one more time.
The stuff that you learn, the information that you're getting or you're receiving about what happened at that time will lead you to determine what items might need to be collected and what items might need to be tested.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So out of the items that were collected at the house or the apartment, at those items, was anything to your knowledge sent off for further examination?
I believe so, but if it was, there would be, they would be sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for further testing.
And do you have an independent memory of what items that were collected from the house that were sent to FDLE for further examination?
I don't recall specifically without looking.
Okay. Now, are you aware at one point in time, there were some fingernail clippings or fingernail swabs taken from Miss Sarah Boone? Is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, that was done on her interview date on would have been the 25th?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what we witnessed in the video.
Yes.
That's what they were doing at that time, correct? And I'm sure at the autopsy, which you were present at, is that correct?
Yes.
And those there would have been some fingertip swabs of George Torres. Or are you familiar with that?
They do swabbing of the hands, to my understanding, and clippings of his nails.
Okay. Do you have an independent memory of the fact that Sarah Boone's fingernail swabs were sent to FDLE for comparison?
I would believe so.
Okay. How about the ones from Mr. Torres? Do you have knowledge that those were sent to FDLE for comparison or identification?
Well, they would have come from him, so I'm not sure what we would have compared him to.
Okay. Were they there to see, or at least they're sent there to see if they can extract DNA?
Oh, okay. Yes. I mean, I'm not sure if they did that testing for his nails clipping specifically, but it would be in the report if so.
Okay. Who would make the decision about sending his finger swabs to FDLE for comparison or evaluation?
I would request it I would request it to the crime scene investigator, and she would author the, I guess, procedure for them to do so.
Okay. And then as to Sarah Boone's swabbings, who requested that those be sent to FDLE for evaluation?
Again, I would assume that I would have done that. I would have requested the CSI to do that.
Are you aware of the results from those evaluations? I'm not asking you for the results, just if you're aware of the results.
I believe I'm aware, but would love to see a report before I specifically answer.
Yes, I'm not going to ask you a specific question about it, okay? But basically, you're aware that it was done, the procedure was done.
Yes.
The analysis was done. Okay. Now, ma'am, so you're through the first day. Then we get to the second day, which would have been, I believe, the 25th of February. Is that correct?
Yes.
And on the 25th of February, was Mr. Torres's autopsy done at that time?
Yes, it was.
Were you present during the autopsy?
Yes, I was.
And did you communicate with the medical examiner at that time?
Yes, I did.
During the course of things, is that where you found out through the medical examiner at the autopsy that there was blunt force trauma injuries?
Yes, that is where I learned more about his injuries.
Now, initially, when you were on the scene on the 24th, did you view Mr. Torres's body?
Yes, I did.
Did you notice in and of yourself on your own something that caused you concern that there might be blunt force trauma injuries?
Yes, I noticed injuries to him, yes.
Okay. So after the autopsy, you had additional information. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, there was an interview. Well, I don't know if it was an interview. There was a meeting set up for Sarah Boone. Is that correct?
Yes.
On the 25th? Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me how that meeting was arranged or how that meeting was set up?
So either before I left the scene, the night of the incident, I obviously met with Sarah and told her that we were leaving. We had to go make next of kin notification. And I would have either at that time said I would like to meet tomorrow and arranged it then, at least to let her know that I would like to meet after the autopsy. And then obviously from watching the video towards the end, she said something about like recalling a conversation that we had, like calling me. So there may have been a phone conversation that occurred later that evening where I either would have confirmed the time or told her the time then. I just don't have that like on an audio. But I know it either took place before I left the scene because I obviously would have, said my goodbyes and told her, hey, we're leaving. We're going to make next of kin notification. She was very concerned about that. So I would want her to know that we were doing that. So it either took place then or it took place on that phone conversation that we had.
All right. The day prior to that, on the 24th, ma'am, you received Sarah Boone's phone. Is that correct?
Yes, her phone was on the scene, yes.
And when you received that phone, Sarah Boone had given you that phone. Is that correct?
No, she was not allowed in the apartment to give me the phone.
I'm sorry. Did she give you permission to take the phone?
Yes.
Okay. Is that correct?
Yes, I was given permission to go through her phone, yes.
Because at that time, you hadn't applied for any type of search warrant to get or search the phone. Is that correct?
No, it was based off of consent.
Okay. So she had consented to you to, for you to have her phone. Is
Yes,
that correct? She also provided you the code to get in the phone. Is that correct?
yes,
So at this point in time, Ms. Boone is cooperating with you. Isn't that correct?
yes.
Now, ma'am, do you recall telling her, Ms. Boone, that she could get her phone back the next day?
I don't recall specifically telling her when she would be able to get her phone back, but I did say something along the lines of we were now going to be taking the phone. I obviously had digital come out. For consent to go through her phone. There was evidence on her phone that I needed to be downloaded. And at the time, I was willing to give back her phone before going through it. And then once we had gone through it and those videos were found, I felt like this was very different. And it changed my perspective on consent. And I decided at that time that it was best to write a search warrant. So consent couldn't be basically like I knew I was going to take her phone. So consent has to be basically given to me throughout the entire period. So she would have had no way to contact me to tell me she no longer consented. So therefore, because there was evidence on the phone, I took the phone. Basically, I potentially told her, maybe we didn't get a full download. I may have said something along the lines of that. As far as me taking the phone, and then I wrote a search warrant. I either started writing the search warrant the night of, but it wasn't signed until I didn't submit it until the next day. And then it was signed the next day on the 25th.
So basically what you're telling us is that she could have withdrawn her consent at any time prior to that search warrant being received. Is that correct?
Well, while I was on scene, but at the end of the day, there was evidence on the phone. So I knew I could go through I knew I could get a search warrant to go through the phone based off there being evidence, like the 911 calls, and her explaining to me that they had spoken to family members.
Please silence your cell phones.
Since they had explained to me that they spoke with family members the night prior. So I wanted to obviously corroborate her statement. So I knew that I would be able to get into the phone through a search warrant. But yeah, she could have not consented and she could have not signed the paper consenting while we were on scene.
But before you left scene, you knew that Sarah Boone was not going to get that phone back. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So when Sarah Boone called you the next day, asking you about bringing her phone back, did you just tell her, Ms. Boone, you're not getting your phone back?
There was not a conversation about her not getting her phone back. She may have inquired about her phone, and I would have explained that we will talk about it when we meet that afternoon.
So did you reach out to Miss Boone that next day, or did Miss Boone reach out to you?
I don't recall a specific if she reached out to me the night of the 24th or before the interview on the 25th. I don't have my call records for that. I'm just basing it off of the interview where she had basically said that, yeah, I have your business card and I can contact you like I did. So my assumption would be that we did have some sort of conversation either the night of the 24th or before the interview on the 25th.
On the 20th, did you make arrangements with Sarah Boone to meet with her on the 25th?
So I either made arrangements on the 24th with her before leaving the scene, and I would have told her I would like to meet with you the next day. Or I said, and I may have given her a specific time at that moment, or when we spoke later that evening on the phone, I may have confirmed the time or given her a time then. But she definitely knew that we were meeting at 3 p.m. on the 25th at Orange County Sheriff's Office Central Operations.
And ma'am, you just don't remember at what point in time you informed her to set up this meeting with her. Is that correct?
It's one or the other.
One or the other?
Yes.
Okay. As it to it being one or the other, you did you prepared the investigative report in this case, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And the investigative report, you basically summarized everything that took place on this case up to a certain point.
Yes,
Is that correct?
it was a summary. Yes.
All right. As far as evidence, as far as witnesses who were talked to and synopsis of what they said to you at that time, is that correct?
Yes, things that I did specifically. It was a summary of that.
I found your investigative report to be in great detail because it helped me track this case from basically beginning to not to the end, but to the point where the report stops. And it seems like in your investigative report, you are very thorough about details. Is that correct?
I would say I'm a detailed person. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So being the detailed person you are and absolutely doing your law enforcement training, they train you that your report should be very much in detail. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because you might have to refer back to them at a later time. Is that one of the reasons? Is that correct?
Yes, and to prepare myself for depositions and trials.
Okay. And just to give an accurate picture of what you did and what took place and what people told you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Being as thorough as you are with these contacts with people, I didn't see in the investigative report when the arrangement was made with Sarah Boone to meet you down, and where did y'all meet?
The Orange County Sheriff's Office Central Operations.
To meet you at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I did not see that in the report. Do you have an explanation why?
It's not typically something I would put in my report.
Okay. Do you remember in having the conversation with Ms. Boone about this meeting that was supposed to take place, that you said that you could not return the phone to her that day because you were not feeling very good? Remember telling her that?
That never happened.
Okay. Ma'am. Judge, if I could have a moment.
Yes, sir, of course.
Ma'am, during this time frame, were you pregnant at this time, at that time?
Yes, I was.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, Ms. Boone, there was a meeting arranged. Is that correct?
For the 25th at 3 p.m., yes.
Yes, and Ms. Boone showed up for that meeting.
She
the
did.
25th.
Yes.
That we saw. Okay. Now, ma'am, I'd like to talk to you about some other investigation. On other witnesses that you took their testimony or statements, recorded statements at different times. Okay? Do you remember Abraham Marino?
Yes.
Okay. Did you take his recorded statement?
Yes, I did.
All right. At the time that you took Mr. Marino's recorded statement, was there anyone else with you?
My partner should have been with me, Detective Scott Lowen.
Excuse me?
My partner should have been with me, Detective Scott Lowen.
Okay. Ma'am, as to who was with you, would it help refresh your memory if you were to see your investigative report as to that interview?
Your Honor, I would object. She hasn't said that she needs any aid in refreshing her memory.
Objection sustained.
Ma'am, was Detective Scott Lowen with you during that interview?
Yes, I believe so.
May we approach?
Yes.
Ma'am, do you have an independent memory of Detective Scott Lowen being with you at that interview?
I believe my partner was with me on the interview. Yes, I typically wouldn't go and do some follow-up without my partner being with me.
Thank you very much. Now, ma'am, did that interview, what date did that interview take place on?
I believe the 26th, February 26th of 2020.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am, was that interview recorded?
It was audio recorded.
Was the entire interview audio recorded?
Yes, the entire interview was audio recorded.
Ma'am, are you familiar with a witness by the name of Brandon Moats?
Yes, I am.
On February the 27th of 2020, did you interview Brandon Moats?
I believe so. It's either the 26th or 27th. Yes.
If you were to see your investigative report, would that help refresh your memory?
All right, I would again object. She hasn't indicated that she needs assistance with her memory.
Approach. Objection sustained.
Ma'am, if it was the 27th, you would not disagree with that, would you?
Well, I just stated that it was either the 26th or 27th.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am, Mr. Moats, he was the neighbor living in the apartment or the connecting apartment, wall apartment with Ms. Boone and Mr. Torres, is that correct?
Yes.
And he's the one who told you about the loud noise, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you interview anyone else in reference to that loud noise?
So I was interviewing Brandon, and then my partner was interviewing Vincent, the other witness, and I came in at the end of the interview with Detective Lowen.
Okay, so that's Vincent. Do you know his last name?
I would butcher it.
Me too, but Tagalog, something like that. We're talking about the same person?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did that interview take place on February the 27th of 2020?
I believe so. I interviewed witnesses after I interviewed Sarah. The 26th or 27th would be my memory.
Okay, thank you. And then, did he also talk to you about a loud noise?
I believe that I was refreshed on the conversation. And yes, he expressed hearing a loud noise as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, and those interviews were actually audio recorded too, is that correct?
Yes, they were.
Now let's go to Ms. Boone's interview. And that would have took place on the 25th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Boone came down. And ma'am, prior to Ms. Boone coming down for the interview, had y'all made the decision that Ms. Boone was going to be arrested?
Yes, I plan to arrest Sarah Boone.
Okay. Did you tell Ms. Boone in arranging the meeting that when she came down there, she was going to be arrested?
Your Honor, I'm going to object this for relevance.
Approach. Objection's overruled.
So ma'am, at that time, you did not tell Ms. Boone prior to coming down there that she was going to be arrested. Is that correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. Why did you not tell Ms. Boone that she was going to be arrested?
We planned to meet at 3 p.m. and go over the autopsy and have another interview. So, I mean, I'm not sure why I would tell her that she's going to be arrested. That would potentially cause her to flee, not come. And then we have to go find her and make it more difficult for everyone.
Or potentially get an attorney to come with her?
She was read her rights that said that she has a right to an attorney. And if one cannot be provided for her, she will be appointed one.
I understand that. You read her those rights when she got there. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
You didn't read those rights to her before she got there, though, did she?
I wasn't in contact with her, physical contact with her.
Okay. So, but you said potentially for fleeing. My question was, potentially she could have got an attorney too to come with her. Is that not correct?
I misunderstood your question. I didn't hear potentially bring an attorney with her, but yes, I guess she potentially brought an attorney with her.
So Ms. Boone shows up and you tell her there's some things that we need to talk about. Is that correct?
It's specific verbiage. I know I said something along the lines of, obviously the autopsy had been conducted, and there were things that we needed to talk about in regards to that.
And prior to discussing it with her and asking her questions, you did read her Miranda warnings. Is that correct?
Prior to, I'm sorry, one more time?
Before you started asking her questions, though, in this interview, before you started asking Ms. Boone's questions, you read her Miranda warnings. Is that correct?
Yes, before I started asking any sort of potentially incriminating questions, she was read her Miranda warnings, yes.
Okay. Ma'am, do you remember as part of the Miranda warnings that you read to Ms. Boone, did you read her the one that states that if you decide to answer questions but want to stop answering and consult with an attorney, you may do so? Do you independently remember reading Ms. Boone that instruction?
I don't recall that specific, but I do have my Miranda card on me, but I don't recall that that's what that says. But it is on audio and video recording.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, ma'am, at that point in time, Ms. Boone wasn't under arrest. Is that correct?
Ms. Boone was not going to be free to leave once she was in my custody.
At that point in time, had you told Ms. Boone that she was not free to leave?
No, I did not.
At that point in time, had you told Ms. Boone that she was under arrest?
I told her at the end of the interview.
Okay, before the interview.
No, I did not tell her before the interview.
Ma'am, why didn't you tell her before the interview?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to asked and answered.
Overruled.
So I have to read her Miranda warnings, and that's what I did. I do not have to tell her that she's under arrest at that time.
Was there a reason, could you have told her that she was under arrest before reading her Miranda warning?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as it calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Ma'am, was it a strategic decision not to tell Ms. Boone that she was under arrest prior to reading her those Miranda warnings?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to relevance.
Approach. The objection.
Replace your windows and doors now and don't pay anything for a year during Renewal by Anderson's ridiculously great sale. Stay tuned to learn more.
When it comes to our homes, we only want the very best, particularly when it comes to choosing replacement windows and doors. Hi, I'm Ann Romer, thrilled to be with Nick from Renewal by Anderson.
Thanks, Ann. We believe that everyone deserves to have windows and doors that look great, stand the test of time, and don't break the bank.
And with our unpredictable weather, I got to tell you, quality and durability, super important.
Absolutely, and that's where our Fibrex composite material truly shines. It's twice as strong as vinyl, so it's warranted not to crack or rot. And with our energy-efficient glass, our windows help keep your home cozy in the winter and cool in the summer.
Well, that all sounds great. So what about the cost?
We know that affordability is top of mind for every homeowner. And we pride ourselves on delivering outstanding windows and doors to fit your style and your budget. Plus, when we come out to your home, we'll give you an exact price quote that's good for a whole year.
Wow, that really sets you apart. So tell me how Renewal by Anderson is tied to the community.
Well, for starters, our team members live right here in your community. We know the challenges homeowners face, and we are committed to delivering the very best for our customers. Plus, we custom build every exclusive Acclaim replacement window in the USA.
It is great to know that you have such strong roots here.
Replace your windows and doors now and don't pay anything for a year during Renewal by Anderson's ridiculously great sale. Before October 31st, buy one window, patio door, or entry door and get the next one 50% off. That's 50% off during your initial visit only with a minimum purchase of 6. With no money down, no payments, and no interest for a year. Buy one window or door and get the next one 50% off, plus don't pay anything for a year. Our ridiculously great sale ends October 31st. Call to book a free appointment.
The Christian community is on scale the most persecuted community around the world.
It is the Palestinian Authority that says if you are Muslim and you convert to Christianity, you've earned the death penalty.
The fastest growing Christian community is in Iran.
I don't believe that you can be a biblical Christian and not vote.
What has happened to the churches that seem to have been radicalized?
Gen Z has been so indoctrinated on this issue.
Liberal divinity schools in
Yes.
the United States of America.
I'm
they
really
were,
glad
they were
you're saying that.
inherently anti-Christian.
We have to expose them. Johnny, Dr. Jeff, welcome back to PragerU. I know it may seem random why I wanted to bring both of you in here, but I think very soon everybody's going to figure out that I have an important conversation to have with both of you. And so welcome back. For those who don't know you, I'm going to share a little bit about my experience and our relationship, and then I'll let you just introduce yourselves as well. And Johnny, you and I go way back. I think we just realized probably 10 years. I got to know you when you were doing work around the world with Christians who were persecuted everywhere. And it was a huge concern of mine and a concern of yours. And so we did incredible work on that side, just notifying the world about the evil that we saw. And you've done a bunch of stuff with PragerU. And so proud of our work together. And Dr. Jeff, you've done many videos with us, which many of them have been incredibly popular. But I would say that the most significant part that you've played in my life was that when we released our interview with Chloe Cole, the young girl who was really manipulated into chemically and surgically castrating herself in the name of the trans movement, and was, convinced that she was born in the wrong body. We released this episode, and I must have received thousands of emails from parents who were really concerned about their own children, and they didn't know how to speak with their Gen Zers about this evil that was happening. And when I didn't quite know what to say to them as far as how to address it and how to stop it, the first thing that came to my mind was Summit Ministries. And so I would send them to you and say, look, I'm here to pray for you, but Dr. Jeff might have something for your family that could help. And so I continue to send people to you when it comes to issues of mental health and families who just have a gaping God-sized hole in their heart. And I know that you've helped so many families. And so I just want to start by just saying thank you. And I love you both. And I'm just so honored that you're here today. And let's get into it. Let's fight some evil together during this conversation.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Jeff, maybe you can just describe a little bit what you do, because I talked about Summit Ministries, and I'm sure many people are now curious about it, and we can go from there.
Well, I equip and support the rising generation. So this is Gen Z. Those are between 12 and 27 years of age, to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview. We don't want students to go out there and feel that they need to be afraid in the culture or reticent. We want them to be courageous and compassionate people who learn to become leaders. We primarily do it through 2-week-long conferences in Colorado and in Georgia every year, as well as through curriculum courses for Christian schools, homeschool co-ops, even release time programs in public schools and things like that. It involves apologetics. How do we know that there is a God? How do we know the Bible is true? But then it's also, all right, so what does that have to do with economics and sociology and psychology and all these other areas? And that's how we're able to help so many parents who are struggling with kids trying to figure out how to make their way in the culture that we have.
Yeah, it is so hard to speak to your own children sometimes, especially if they're teenagers. And it's hard to not come across like you're towering over them and lecturing them, and somehow
it's such a great point. It's so easy in theory, right? You
Yeah.
can have all the strategies, but learning how to relate to your own kids primarily comes about through asking questions and getting them to talk. That's the toughest thing that parents have to do. And my main advice for them is never underestimate the value of looking dumb. Just ask the question. Well, I've never heard of that before. And, you have to explain that to me because I don't get it. And then let them inform you about what's going on, and it starts the conversation.
Yeah, both Johnny and I have kids around the same age. And so how do we make sure that we're not towering over them and preaching to them when sharing important advice with them? And so, Johnny, share with us a little bit what you do and the type of good that you brought to the world.
Yeah, well, before I do, I should say, like, one of the incredible things about what both of you do is that you make information available to those that are looking for it. And, you know, when I was my kid's age, my parents went through a traumatic experience, and I began to doubt so much of what I believed. And it was a series of apologetics teachers, you know, that as I was always a curious kid, so I had big like questions, and for me it wasn't enough to just like feel like I was my Christianity. I had to make sure my brain aligned with it. And my church wasn't available. My parents were going through a personal crisis. We got kicked out of the private school we were in because we couldn't pay the bill any longer. We were in poverty. And I went to some books, and as this like curious young child who had to have my questions answered, it wasn't enough to feel like faith mattered. It was apologetics, you know, these reasons, rational reasons to believe. And so I'm not sure I would be doing any of my work had it not been that I was able to find resources like both of you produce and make available. And as for my work, I'm probably best known for what I do around the world to help persecuted people. And so persecuted Christians, you know, the Christian community is on scale the most persecuted community around the world. But I help people. I help people everywhere, and I think religion can play a constructive role. You know, there's a lot of talk about how religion throws oxygen on fires, but in my experience, religion is actually a key to making peace around the world. You know, as well. So I'm a tent maker like the Apostle Paul was. You know, he had a job and used the job to fund what he does, and that's what I do. I'm a business person. I preach sermons in churches. I write books. But I feel like I'm alive in order to be a voice for those who don't have a voice. And I think that's really what drives me. You know, every day when I wake up, if I'm looking at the news of the day or deciding how I'm going to invest my limited time and resources, we have to hand a better world to the next generation.
Wow.
And that takes a lot. It takes a lot of work and a lot of courage, right? I'd love to get into evangelical Christianity a little bit because, you know, many of us who are living here in the United States of America talk about evangelicals all the time. And I think that maybe some of us are a little confused and there are some holes in our understanding of evangelical Christians. With that said, we're all aware of a very large segment of our population being evangelicals. And you hear about evangelicals especially during voting season, right? It's like, you know, how are they gonna vote? What are they gonna do? And so will you just give us a brief explanation of the status of evangelical Christians in America and I guess a little bit of the background?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with some numbers and then I'll make some observations. So there are about 80 million evangelicals in the United States. It may be pushing 90 million. They're 10 times that around the world. So 700 to 800 million. It is by far, by a mile, the fastest growing Christian community in the world. It's the second largest Christian community. You know, it used to be that the Catholic Church was first, and then the Protestant movements, and then in the Orthodox Church. While evangelicalism is sort of a branch of Protestantism, it's really become its own thing. What's super interesting about it, Marissa, is that there's no evangelical pope. Okay. There's something sometimes when I'm trying to explain to my secular friends who aren't religious like I am, you know, why are there so many evangelicals? And I actually draw a comparison to the free market in the United States of America, because you know, as a evangelical pastor, you don't have to ask anyone permission to start a church, to start a school. You have to go to the bishop or the archbishop or the pope. You can just do it. And by the way, if your church is all of a sudden it's not teaching the Bible, or crazy things are being taught to the kids in Sunday school, or there's some issue in the leadership, well, you can just go start another church, you know, a mile down the road. And if that church does a better job of caring for the community and teaching the next generation, it'll grow. And so in the United States of America, in every large city in our country, we have churches that have 10, 15, 20,000 people in those churches. And around the world, we have churches that have 50, 75, 100,000 people in churches. And so the evangelical community is huge. It's a traditional religious community. So it takes the Bible seriously. It takes seriously passing down its values to the next generation. And It's also very powerful politically. It's the single largest electoral bloc in the United States of America. There is no group in the United States of America larger when every election than the evangelical community. And when you look at trends among Latino Americans, for instance, like Latino Americans are moving more towards the right electorally. That's actually largely an evangelical trend. A lot of Hispanic Americans are converting from Catholic forms of Christianity to these evangelical churches. But the last thing I'll say, Marissa, is, I mean, you guys probably remember a few years ago when on The View, I forget the lady on The View. She's older than President Biden, or about President Biden's age, but she has red hair.
Joy.
Yeah, not a lot of joy, by the way. But
No
she,
joy.
no joy and joy. And I was amazed, that when I saw her and President Biden interacting with one another, but they're the same age, so I get it. But Joy a few years ago said that Mike Pence, the former vice president, was mentally ill because of his Christianity. This was like an observation she made or something like that.
They say the dumbest things on that show. I don't know how we can watch it.
It's crazy. But afterwards, a media outlet asked me Fox News to comment on it, and I said that Mike Pence's Christianity, evangelical Christianity, is the Christianity of Billy Graham.
Yeah,
it's the Christianity of Billy Graham and Pope John Paul II staring down the Soviet Union. It's the Christianity of the Salvation Army. So there isn't a crisis in the world where the evangelical church doesn't respond. And that goes all the way back to early America.
My question is, so in some ways, I feel like it's like 2 Christians, 3 opinions. So I'm trying to understand, in what way does the theology differ between evangelical Christianity and, let's say, Catholicism or any of the other strands of Christianity? And what makes evangelical Christianity unique?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure you have answers to that question as well, but I'll give a couple. The first one is the hierarchical point that I just made. Like that's a big difference.
No pope.
And the second thing, there are actually some really profound beliefs that evangelicals have that actually make it a very open religion, like our belief in grace. Like most Christians, evangelicals believe that in the original sin, like the fall of man, I think most regular everyday people believe that people were born good and they learn to do bad things along life. We believe the exact opposite. We believe everybody was messed up from the very beginning. Everyone's hopeless. Everyone's, has all kinds of problems. And only by the grace of Jesus and, his death, burial, and resurrection on the cross do we have the forgiveness of our sins. And so it's not a judgmental faith. In fact, Jesus said you shouldn't judge. He's like, the one thing you shouldn't do. And why shouldn't you judge? Because we're all messed up and we all need God. And so evangelicals believe you have to have this like individual salvific experience where you put your faith in Jesus. They believe the Bible is the word of God. They believe the Bible is inerrant. I mean, these are some of the foundational beliefs, but it's very simple to be an evangelical Christian. You have to come to the end of yourself, and all you need to know is that you can't do anything, but thank God he sent his son to die on a cross and to forgive you. And that's it. And then you're saved. It's what we believe. And then you're part of this amazing global Christian community. So everywhere I go all around the world, I always see our church. And the first hospital in the United Arab Emirates, this amazing modern country, was started by evangelicals who left America to start a hospital. And the presidents of the United Arab Emirates and the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates and the minister of foreign the ambassador to the United States, they were all born in that hospital started by evangelicals. And so it's like this amazing movement all around the world of Christians that know they're messed up. They need God, but the good news is he's there for them because of the story of Jesus.
And they're not doing it because there's some top-down mandate. You've got to do this, and in fact, it's not even because you need to somehow earn your salvation. This is a characteristic of evangelicals, is that you actually can't earn it.
You just have to give up.
You have to give up. It has to be given to you by God. I studied
and
philosophy.
and it's once and for all. I mean, this is the other thing that's different from a lot of Catholic churches. Like, you have to go and confess your sins at the parish, and on and on. Like, we don't. My pastor doesn't need to know my sins. Like, it's a relationship that we have with God. I mean, I think it's direct in that way. Yeah.
Dr. Jeff,
I was going to say the philosophers for hundreds of years before Jesus were questioning, how do we know that anything really exists? How do we know the physical world and the world out there are really connected? And they were always looking for, they used this term, the logos. What's the logos? What makes sense of it all? And the Gospel of John says that what makes sense of it all is Jesus, that in the beginning was the logos, the word of God, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And that's core to the evangelical message. So all the things that we've been talking about here make sense and allow evangelicals to even work with people from a lot of other traditions, so that everybody who starts off with the realization that that the truth exists, and it's not just a mathematical formula, it's not just a logical proposition, it's a person, it's Jesus. And then evangelicals have been able to influence every aspect of society, from science to the arts, with that core belief, and work together with people who believe differently for the betterment and the flourishing of humanity.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, part of the story in America. I mean, we only have America because people left a country in order to seek religious freedom. And that religious freedom that they were seeking, was a type of Protestant Christianity that led basically to modern evangelicalism. And so, when people start talking about restricting the religious freedom of American Christians, of evangelical Christians, like, this cuts to the very foundation of the United States of America. In fact, it was many of the most famous, revered evangelical institutions in American history. They were leading marches against slavery in the United States of America. I mean, this is evangelicalism, and the religious freedom of evangelicals is, it's the first clause of the first sentence of the First Amendment that enshrines our religious freedom. And we don't believe in religious freedom at all unless we believe in religious freedom for all. But when our founders were writing that sentence on that First Amendment and debating all of this, the Christians that they were largely thinking of were the evangelical Christians. That's what they were thinking of. And even when Thomas Jefferson coins the term the separation of church and state, he coins the term in a letter to the Baptist in Danbury, Connecticut, because the Baptists were concerned that the government was going to encroach on their rights. And Thomas Jefferson says, you don't have to worry about that, because in the United States, we have a separation of church and state, which was about the state not being able to control the message and the mission of the church. We flipped the thing on its head.
When I was a kid, my family would drive down the street, and I'd always ask, what do these people believe? What do these people believe? And they were mostly evangelical churches of one variety, some variety. And I thought at the time, isn't that sad that we have all these different churches? But what you brought up earlier, Johnny, I think is so powerful, that there's a free market of religion in the United States. At the time of America's founding, only 17% of the people regularly attended church. Within just 2 or 3 decades, 51% of the population regularly attended church, because they had the freedom to choose how they would worship and organize themselves together in community. It's a tremendous force. I mean, probably $2 trillion of America's economy every year is from the work and the money that evangelicals are giving to help people.
I mean, truly, they have been an engine for so much good. I've also noticed that many of the evangelical churches have moved away from biblical worldviews.
Right.
And people have been critical of the Pope and the Catholic Church, but I don't think it's fair to only criticize them. I criticize Jewish synagogues as well, who have been infiltrated by this woke Marxist ideology. And so I think I'm as a freedom junkie as anybody else is, but at what point do we step in and say what has happened to the churches, including the evangelical churches that seem to have been radicalized?
I mean, there's underneath this problem is a different problem, which is a courage problem. We need a type of courage revival in the churches of America, because what's happened, and by the way, that's biblical. In the Christian New Testament, it says, if we care about the opinions of people, we cannot serve Jesus. So I can't be a faithful Christian if I wake up every day and decide what I'm going to believe or what I'm going to do with my life based upon whether it's popular or not. I literally cannot serve Jesus if my number one priority are the opinions of what people will think about me. And yet our entire culture is in that direction. I mean, from the way social media works and all of these things. But then there's an insidious thing that's happened, Marissa, which are political activists who've decided that they disagree with evangelicals on certain political ideas. So they're going to stigmatize the whole community. So like routinely I'm asked almost every, except for with the home team, let's say, almost every interview, every conversation I have, aren't you guys a bunch of Christian nationalists? This is
By the way, they call me
phrase.
that too, a white Christian nationalist Barbie.
Do they really?
They do.
Wow. She get a bumper sticker. That's
Instead I have a dress, a pink one.
It's fantastic. You should get a suit. This term, though, it's a political term. It's not a theological term or a sociological term. Evangelicals don't want a theocracy in America. Evangelicals just want to be left alone.
Freedom.
And so what the left does is they stigmatize a group. So what they'll say is like, they want evangelicals to be fearful of engaging in the public square because they feel bad about it, right? They want to stigmatize the community from political activism, and secondly, they want to cause other Americans to be scared of evangelicals. And there was sort of something really, really interesting that happened in the aftermath of the assassination attempt on former President Trump, when the media began to sort of realize that the people in that audience we're not these uneducated people from the middle of the country that were,
deplorables.
Deplorables. When the stands were filled with doctors and bankers and business people and firefighters, like those are the people. So evangelicals are like only politically active if you provoke them, if you try to take away their rights, if you try to suppress, their religious freedom, these sorts of things. They will come out, and when they come out, there's no group like it. But yeah, this term Christian nationalism, and before that, it was like white evangelicals. It's like, oh no, those are just the white evangelicals. But evangelicalism isn't even a white movement in the United States of America. Every church I go to is there's many Black and Latino, and it's an international movement. There's no Christian movement around the world as diverse as the evangelical.
Oh, I mean, Dr. Jeff, you work with Gen Zers. That's the group that cares the most what people think about them. And so they are so afraid of being called a white Christian nationalist Barbie or something like that. Is that something that you're noticing there as well?
I see this in churches a lot. This is, if there's a flaw in the way we're describing evangelicalism, it is that you have to seek popularity. If you want people to come to your church, you have to get them to like you.
Yes.
And so how do you make sure you get people to like you? And that is an ongoing conversation in Christianity, especially in evangelicalism. Well, it's especially true for young adults. So 2/3 of young adults today say they do not want to hold an opinion that differs from their peers, because being liked is the most important thing in a social media world. So they will ask then, well, what am I being taught in school, and how do I reconcile my Christianity with that, rather than asking, how do I take my biblical faith and make what's happening in school fit? Right. So it's exactly the opposite. I'll just give you an example. I think a lot of young adults today, for example, they'll support anti-Israel efforts because they think Israel is a bully. And they were always told by their parents, you should not be a bully. And if you find a bully, you should turn them in, or you should stand against them, or whatever. That's good character to do that. A lot of people didn't realize that the education system and social media weaponized that belief and turned it into a sort of Marxist oppressor versus oppressed mindset, where we want this dialectical conflict because that's how society advances. So you've got a lot of young adults who are now saying, well, how do I make my faith fit into that Marxist framework? Rather than saying that Marxist framework is bankrupt because it ignores the fact that anything exists other than the material world. It can never be right. So what we should be asking is, how do I take my biblical faith and use it to bring flourishing in places where Marxism has created total bankruptcy of society?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about this phenomenon is it's so insidious because this is a generation that, for whatever reason, has been wired to help people. I mean, I always say they would walk barefoot over the Sahara Desert to like help one kid. And yet these political activists have managed to weaponize that good instinct in all kinds of dangerous ways. And as a student and a scholar even of Christian persecution around the world, like, I can tell you, all over this globe, there are persecuted Christians that are like shouting warnings to the United States of America, given what they're seeing. Number one, they need us as the United States,
That's right.
the most powerful country in human history, the wealthiest country in human history, based upon this foundation to continue to hold the line on religious freedom. But they're also seeing what happened to them start to happen here. So, you know, I don't like to draw parallels between Christians that were beheaded by ISIS and between, you know, being marginalized or stigmatized and, you know, still the freest country in the world.
Right. And by the way, that's not even a thing of the past. The Christians are persecuted right now all over the Middle East. And nobody is talking about that.
More Christians were killed in Nigeria last year in one country, and actually a few states of one country, than ISIS killed during the entirety of their caliphate when that was on the news all the time. But what people don't realize is the foremost persecutors of Christians are actually not the Islamists. They're number two, statistically speaking. The foremost persecutors of Christians were the communists.
Well, communists in general have killed more people than anybody.
But the way they hunted people of faith. And so when people outside of our country or within our country start seeing these like Marxist sort of ideas and instincts rise up, this only ends in one place. And that's what these persecuted Christians have told me all around the world. They, you know, not to draw parallels between beheadings and anything else, but they always say it never started this way here. It started with our kids being treated differently in school. It started with us being treated differently at work. It started with lawfare, these weapons of the state in order to ask, then demand, and then force us to comply. And these are warning signs all over our country. But unfortunately, this ideology is being like delivered on a silver platter to a generation that should actually be changing the world.
It's delivered through the conveniences of technology and the internet, and I guess the soft words like social justice, where they just remove the word justice by putting the word social, I guess, in front of it, and it's not real true justice. You know, Dr. Jeff, you mentioned how our kids are being radicalized through this Marxist ideology, and you brought up the issue of Israel, and I know you ended up writing this entire book, which it actually surprised me that you wrote a book on Israel, because that is not what I associated your work with.
It surprised me too.
Right? I was like, suddenly I get a call and I'm like, oh, there's this book. Why did you? I have a hard time understanding why a tiny country on the other side of the planet with less residents than Los Angeles, the city, has become the focal point of the world, let alone our institutions here in the United States. And now you come about and you're also focused on writing about Israel. And so why so?
My interest, Marissa, is that Gen Z has been so indoctrinated on this issue that it's gotten to the point of being quite dangerous. A level of anti-Semitism we haven't seen since prior to the outbreak of World War II. And I saw it right after the October 7th terrorist attacks on Israel. I would have expected people would say to their Jewish neighbors, "We've got your back." That didn't happen. Almost immediately, it was anti-Israel sentiment that was developed. And there were Christian organizations from liberal Christian churches that were actually a part of that. But it got to the point where 60% of young adults said they believed that Hamas's killing of 1,200 Israeli civilians and the taking of 254 hostages was justified because of Palestinian grievances. It was no longer just, we feel sorry for the beleaguered Palestinians. It was, Hamas is right, Israel is wrong. And that's why I wrote the book on Israel. I actually traveled there to the war zone, met people from the left, the right, secular, religious, everybody I could in between to try to figure out, how do I bring back a message of truth? Because what's happening is just sheer propaganda.
Hmm. Why do you think this propaganda is so prevalent here in the United States?
Oh, I think there are two reasons for it. And first, with Hamas, you saw Hamas unleash its propaganda campaign at the same time it unleashed its military campaign. I have a planning memo for the Students for Justice in Palestine group, which is a Hamas front group. I have a planning memo from the day of the attack where they held a conference call to outline what their strategy would be for the next.
They sent out identical instructions to groups all over.
So they knew
all over
exactly
the
what to
country,
say.
like,
This is how you're going. These are the words. This is how you're going to use it. But that fit in with the narrative of the progressive left saying, oh, everything in the world is oppressor versus oppressed. Israel